The sun had just dipped below the horizon when Flight 732 lifted off from Singapore's Changi Airport. The Boeing 737's cabin lights dimmed into a calm golden hue as passengers settled into their seats, most unaware that within hours, their flight would become headline news around the world. It was supposed to be a routine 6-hour journey to Sydney's smooth skies, clear weather, and an experienced crew. In the cockpit, Captain Raymond Collins, a 52-year-old pilot with more than 2 decades of experience, adjusted the throttles with quiet confidence. His co-pilot, a younger officer named Daniels, monitored the instruments beside him. The two exchanged the familiar rhythm of flight checks, mechanical precision born of years of discipline. In the cabin, passengers reclined. Flight attendants rolled trolleys down the aisles, and somewhere near seat 23A, a woman named Claire Mitchell, 30 years old, watched the sky outside with the kind of peace that only comes when you've left something heavy behind. She had been through a difficult few years, a lost job, a broken engagement, and dreams she had quietly buried. But tonight she was traveling for a new beginning, a new position in Australia. To anyone watching, she was just another traveler, quiet, observant, lost in thought. What no one knew was that years earlier, she had trained as a pilot instructor's assistant, before giving up the dream due to financial constraints. 30 minutes after takeoff, the flight climbed to cruising altitude, the world below fading into clouds. The seatbelt signs dimmed. Passengers ordered meals. Laughter and the sound of glasses clinking filled the air. Everything was normal. Until it wasn't. 2 hours into the flight, turbulence began to shake the aircraft, mild at first, then stronger. Captain Collins requested altitude adjustments, his tone steady. But then, mid-sentence, his hand slipped off the throttle. The co-pilot turned and saw the captain slumped over, unconscious. Inside the cockpit, alarms began to chirp. Altitude warnings, heading deviations, automated alerts. Co-pilot Daniels tried to regain control, calling out for help through the intercom. He initiated emergency procedures, but within minutes, his voice started to tremble, not from panic, but from exhaustion. He wasn't feeling right either. Something was off. The oxygen levels, perhaps. The sudden pressure drop. The plane began to drift. In the cabin, flight attendants moved quickly to calm the passengers as oxygen masks deployed. The once peaceful flight had turned into a storm of flashing lights and uncertainty. Through the windows, flashes of lightning illuminated the clouds, distant but menacing. Claire felt her pulse racing. Her instincts, buried for years, kicked in automatically. She unbuckled her seatbelt, ignoring the warning signs above. The lead flight attendant rushed by, her face pale. Claire grabbed her arm, her voice steady, asking what was wrong. The attendant hesitated, then whispered that the captain was down, and the first officer was struggling. The next few minutes blurred into chaos. Passengers cried, prayed, and some clutched their seats in silence. The plane's nose dipped slightly. Not dangerously yet, but enough for everyone to feel the shift in gravity. Through the thin metal door ahead, the fate of 178 people hung in balance. The co-pilot's breathing grew shallow. He fought to maintain altitude, but his vision was fading. A mayday call barely escaped the cockpit before his voice faded out completely. The plane leveled for a few seconds, autopilot flickering on, then off. And then silence. In that suspended moment, thousands of feet above the dark sea, Flight 732 flew without command, a metal giant adrift, guided only by momentum and a dying system. Claire felt something heavy settle in her chest. She looked down the aisle. No one was moving toward the cockpit. No one even knew what to do. Her heartbeat steadied. The years of forgotten training, the simulator hours, the lectures about emergency control, all came rushing back. She stood up. It wasn't courage. It was instinct, the part of her that had never truly stopped being a pilot. As she made her way toward the front, turbulence hit again. The plane lurched violently, throwing trays and bags into the air. People screamed. The flight attendants shouted for everyone to stay seated, but Claire kept moving, one hand gripping the overhead bins, the other bracing against the wall. At the cockpit door, a crew member blocked her path, but one look at Claire's eyes stopped her. Determination replaced fear. Inside, the sight was grim. The captain was motionless, his headset still hanging from one ear. The co-pilot was semi-conscious, trying to breathe through the oxygen mask. The control panel blinked in warning. Altitude drop, autopilot disengaged, left engine imbalance. Claire took one breath, steady, deep, and reached for the controls. Outside the window, lightning illuminated the horizon. Beneath them stretched the vast, dark ocean. No land in sight, no guiding light except for the blinking instruments that warned of descent. She fastened the headset, scanning frequencies. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Her voice remained calm as she began to stabilize the yoke manually. The Boeing responded sluggishly, but it responded. Slowly, carefully, she regained altitude. The altitude indicator steadied at 24,000 feet. The cabin stopped shaking. The screams faded into quiet sobs. The aircraft, for the first time in what felt like forever, was steady again. And in that cockpit, a 30-year-old woman who was supposed to have left. Aviation behind became the only thing standing between 178 lives and the unforgiving sea below. The radios flickered faintly, static blending with broken voices. A ground controller's call came through weakly, asking for identification. Claire opened her mouth to respond, and that's when she realized the full weight of what she had done. She was in control, alone. As lightning flashed again, her reflection appeared in the cockpit glass, pale, determined, resolute. This was no longer just a flight. It was a test of memory, instinct, and human will. And somewhere down there, the ocean waited, silent, endless, and watching. The narrow aisle trembled under her feet as the aircraft lurched again, lightning slicing through the clouds outside. The sound of rain pelting against the fuselage echoed like distant gunfire. The woman, Claire, steadied herself against the seatbacks, her breath coming in short gasps. The cabin lights flickered once more, bathing the interior in a mix of red and blue hues. Her heart pounded. She didn't know what she would find inside the cockpit, but she knew she couldn't just sit and wait for the inevitable. Around her, passengers whispered prayers. Mothers held their children tight, and an old man's trembling hands gripped the armrest. The chaos behind her seemed to fade as her focus narrowed on that one glowing red door ahead. She reached the cockpit door and slightly ajar, and for a moment she hesitated. What if no one was alive inside? She pushed it open. The sight froze her where she stood. Both pilots were slumped forward over the controls, their headsets dangling. The panels in front of them flashing warnings. Autopilot disengaged. Altitude alert. Terrain. Terrain. The cockpit was drenched in red light, blinking furiously with each system failure. The control yoke vibrated, the aircraft shaking harder. Now as another lightning strike lit up the sky beyond the windshield, Claire's instincts screamed at her to run back, to call for help. But there was no one else. The flight attendants had disappeared into the chaos of the cabin, trying to calm passengers. The intercom crackled uselessly. Her eyes scanned the controls, the switches, the levers, the glowing indicators. A storm of lights that made no sense to anyone but a trained pilot. But something deep inside her clicked, a memory buried under years of ordinary life. She had once sat beside her father in a cockpit. He had been a pilot. She stepped forward, shaking but focused. The air inside the cockpit felt warmer, dense with tension, electricity, and the smell of overheated circuits. One of the pilots groaned faintly, but his eyes didn't open. His oxygen mask dangled loosely by his side. Claire gently touched his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" No response. Her pulse quickened. The storm outside roared again, and she could feel the plane dropping slightly. She could hear the altitude warning beep, that shrill sound that meant one thing: they were losing height. She grabbed the control column instinctively, her hands trembling. The movement steadied her. Her father's voice echoed in her mind from years ago. "If you ever lose control, look at the horizon first. The sky will tell you where you are." She looked up. Beyond the windshield, through streaks of rain, she could just barely see the faint glow of the storm. Clouds shifting, and below them flashes of distant city lights. They weren't too far from land. She took a deep breath and searched for the radio switch. The panel was alive with blinking warnings, but one green light caught her eye. The comm channel indicator. She pressed the transmit button. "This is This is Flight 247. Both pilots are unconscious. Can anyone hear me? Static. Then a burst of distorted sound. Flight 247, identify yourself. This is air traffic control. Who's speaking? She swallowed hard. My name is Claire. I'm a passenger. The pilots, they're unresponsive. The plane's dropping fast! For a few seconds, only the storm answered her. Then a calm, trained voice returned. Copy that, Claire. Stay calm. We've got you on radar. You're currently at 18,000 feet and descending. We're sending military assistance and connecting you with a pilot to guide you step by step. Her knees almost gave out from relief. But the situation was far from safe. The plane lurched again, the sound of thunder booming like a cannon. She looked over the controls, some readings blinking red, others stable, and tried to make sense of them. She remembered bits and pieces of what her father had shown her as a child. Attitude indicator, throttle, altitude dial. The voice on the radio continued, measured and steady. Claire, listen carefully. Can you see the yoke, the main control handle? Yes, she said, gripping it tightly. Good. Gently pull it back. Not too much. Just stabilize the descent. Keep the horizon line centered on the screen in front of you. Her arms trembled, but she followed the instructions. Slowly, the shaking eased. The altitude warning stopped for a moment. The plane leveled slightly. Few gasps came from the cabin behind her, passengers realizing the dive had slowed. Okay, Claire, the voice said again. You're doing great. Now check if autopilot can re-engage. Look for a button marked AP or CMDA. Do you see it? Her fingers hovered over the illuminated buttons. She pressed it. A soft beep. The red lights dimmed slightly. Good. Autopilot is reconnected. That should hold you steady for a moment. She exhaled. A breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her hands shook as adrenaline coursed through her. For the first time since the chaos began, she dared to look outside. The storm still raged, but through the clouds, a sliver of moonlight broke through. In that moment, she realized something extraordinary. She wasn't just keeping the plane in the air. She was keeping 200 people alive. In the cabin, a quiet calm began to return. Passengers whispered prayers of gratitude, unaware that a woman, a stranger among them, now sat in the captain's seat. One of the flight attendants peeked in through the door, tears in her eyes. Are they alive? She asked softly. Claire nodded faintly. Barely. But we have control. For now. The attendant's voice broke with emotion. Who are you? She hesitated for a second, then answered quietly, eyes still fixed on the horizon. Someone who used to be afraid of flying. As the aircraft sliced through the storm, the voice on the radio spoke again. Claire, we've got good news. You're being joined by 2 F-22 escort jets. They'll guide you down once we're closer to land. Just stay steady and follow their lead. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Claire caught sight of 2 faint lights approaching in the distance, growing brighter, steadier, until their silhouettes became clear. F-22 Raptors. For the first time that night, she felt she wasn't alone. The impossible had just begun. The Boeing 787 tore through a sky alive with lightning. Each flash illuminated the clouds like a momentary explosion, revealing the massive aircraft struggling against fierce winds. The night outside was chaotic, the rain hammering against the fuselage like thousands of beating drums. Inside, every vibration, every flicker of the lights carried the weight of uncertainty. In the cockpit, Claire's focus had sharpened to a razor edge. Sweat clung to her forehead as she kept both hands on the controls. The hum of the engines, the beeping warnings, the tremor of turbulence, everything blended into a haunting rhythm of survival. Her eyes scanned the flight instruments, numbers fluctuating wildly as the storm pressed against the aircraft's wings. The red glow from the panels lit her face with an eerie resolve. Every second demanded perfection. Far below, the world was invisible, just a void of darkness and electric storms. The navigation systems flickered as electromagnetic interference hit the plane, and static filled the radio channel. For a few seconds, there was no connection with the ground, only the storm's roar. Then, from the far left, faint streaks of blue light cut through the clouds. 2 shapes emerging from the storm, like guardians of the night, F-22 Raptors. They slid into formation beside the Boeing, silent, powerful, their wings glinting under the flashes of lightning. Their presence brought both awe and disbelief. fighter jets escorting a commercial plane through a storm. The reflection of their lights shimmered across the Boeing's windows, casting an ethereal glow inside the cockpit. Claire steadied the control yoke and took a breath that trembled with exhaustion. The F-22s flew so close that their outlines became clear through the rain. Sharp, steady, unwavering. Their purpose was to guide, to guard, to make sure she was not alone. For the first time in what felt like hours, she wasn't fighting the storm by herself. Down the aisle, the passengers felt the plane's motion changing, steadier, smoother. The turbulence still shook the cabin, but there was now a rhythm, not chaos. A flight attendant walked the narrow aisle with trembling hands, checking seat belts, whispering reassurances that even she didn't fully believe. Some passengers sat in silence, eyes closed, praying. Others clung to the armrests, watching the rain streaks across the windows like silver rivers. In one seat, a mother held her child close, both of them wrapped under a blanket. A soft glow from the emergency lights painted faces with pale blue and orange hues. Despite fear, something else began to spread through the cabin. Faith. They didn't know the woman flying the plane. They didn't know her name or her story. But they believed she was fighting for them. In the cockpit, Claire's world was reduced to numbers, lights, and instinct. The F-22's escort brought a strange calm, like being led through darkness by invisible hands. Every time the lightning illuminated the clouds, she could see the fighter jets holding formation, wings slicing through the rain. The communication systems flickered back to life briefly. She caught fragments of instructions from the airbase, coordinates, heading, altitude. Static swallowed the rest, but the path ahead became clearer. She adjusted the throttle, leveled the wings, and began descent protocols through sheer memory. The aircraft shuddered as it dropped altitude, the pressure fluctuating inside the cabin. Oxygen masks swayed gently from the ceiling, some passengers still clutching them in fear. Outside the storm began to thin, clouds parting, slightly to reveal faint specks of city lights below. For the first time, the ground was visible. Claire's eyes followed the faint glow far beneath the clouds. Civilization, safety, life. But the runway was still miles away, and the engines were running at critical limits. She checked fuel readings, dangerously low. The lightning had caused intermittent fuel burn imbalances, and the right engine flickered. But there was no turning back. The F-22s adjusted formation, one flying slightly ahead, guiding the descent path. Their presence felt almost symbolic, strength meeting courage in the middle of chaos. The storm continued to roar around them, but the heart of the scene had changed. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was destiny aligning in real time. Inside the cabin, passengers began to feel the descent. The vibrations lessened, replaced by a deep mechanical hum. Through the small oval windows, the flicker of the storm was replaced by soft, distant light, the world returning. Every pair of eyes turned forward to the sealed cockpit door, unaware of the woman beyond it who carried their fate with trembling hands and unbreakable resolve. Claire's breathing was heavy, but her mind clear. Below, the lights of the airport glowed faintly through sheets of rain. The runway was still a shadow, but radar confirmed alignment. The Boeing, though wounded, was ready to make its final descent. She knew the hardest part was yet to come, the landing through crosswinds and slick ground. As the F-22s began their protective approach on either side, the storm gave one last roar of thunder. Lightning illuminated the clouds one more time, a flash so bright it etched the image of the two fighter jets and the Boeing between them, suspended in chaos and courage. For that brief second, the sky looked like a battlefield of fate. But one woman, one plane, and two guardians continued forward, defying every odd written against them. And as the engines howled and the storm slowly began to fade, the world below held its breath, unaware that in the clouds above, history was still being written. The storm was not gone, only quieter, watching. Dark clouds still churned above the sea of city lights, but their violence had softened. The Boeing 787, scarred and trembling, cut through the final layer of turbulence with both engines roaring unevenly. The fuel indicators blinked warning red, their rhythm matching the thunder outside, a reminder that every second mattered. Claire's hands stayed firm on the control yoke. Her shoulders ached, her arms burned, but she refused to let go. The woman who had never flown a commercial jet before was now guiding one through the aftermath of a storm toward the faint, glowing line of a runway waiting below. The air around the aircraft shimmered with rain and static. Below the clouds, the first glimpse of the airport appeared, runway lights stretching like a luminous path across the wet ground. It wasn't just a landing strip. It looked like salvation itself, shining through the mist. The two F-22s adjusted their formation again, one slightly above, one beside. Their steady presence became Claire's compass in the darkness. The storm had stripped the world of everything but instinct and light, and instinct was all she had left. Inside the cabin, silence had replaced panic. The passengers sat still, faces pale and eyes fixed ahead. Mothers held their children tighter. A few closed their eyes, whispering silent prayers, while others simply stared at the faint light outside the windows. The hum of the engines was deep, uneven, but it was still there, still alive. Even the flight attendants had stopped moving, hands clasped, their faith placed entirely in the woman they didn't even know. As the Boeing descended lower, the control stick vibrated violently, turbulence clawing at the wings as the aircraft pushed through heavy crosswinds. The landing gear indicator lit up green. A metallic rumble echoed through the fuselage as the wheels extended into the storm, slicing through streams of rain. The runway lights grew larger, sharper, clearer. The plane was now fully aligned, but the wind was fierce, shifting direction every few seconds. The F-22s stayed close, guiding the descent path like silent protectors. Claire could feel the drag pulling at the left wing. She adjusted the rudder pedal, compensating instinctively, her movements fast but precise. Her breath fogged the inside of her oxygen mask. Her eyes never left the instruments. 500 feet. The altitude call-out echoed through the cockpit in a calm, mechanical tone. Outside, the city shimmered beneath a thin veil of rain, its lights reflecting like stars on wet glass. 400 feet. The aircraft jolted slightly, lightning flashing in the distance, painting the sky gold for a second. The F-22s began to veer outward, their escort complete. From this point, she was alone. 300 feet. Wind speed fluctuated. The runway lights blurred for a moment, then snapped back into focus. Claire steadied the control, keeping the nose aligned with the center line. The Boeing responded heavy but obedient. 200 feet. The world outside was all color and motion. Rain streaks, blue lights, and the endless hum of engines. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the storm. She eased the throttle, prepared for flare. 100 feet. Every instinct in her screamed focus. The Boeing hovered in the air's resistance, its shadow merging with the runway's reflection. The crosswind pushed hard from the right. She countered, her left hand steady on the throttle, her right on the control. 50 feet. The runway lights illuminated the cockpit. The sound of rain on glass became softer. The storm, as if exhausted, began to ease. 20 feet. The aircraft descended with a slow, graceful defiance against gravity. The nose tilted upward slightly. The landing gear met the earth, a jarring, powerful contact. The plane bounced once, then settled. Screeching tires, spray of rainwater, roar of reversers. The Boeing 787 rolled down the runway, leaving a trail of mist and water behind. The engine screamed as Claire deployed the reverse thrust, the force pressing her into the seat. Slowly, the speed began to drop, 160 knots. On 80, the plane finally slowed enough for her to steer it toward the emergency lane. The storm had broken. The world was silent again. Inside the cabin, the passengers were frozen in disbelief. For a few moments, no one moved, no one spoke. Then, a sound began to rise from the quiet. Applause. Then tears. Then the collective release of fear that had held everyone hostage. People stood, crying, holding hands with strangers. Some simply looked upward, whispering thanks. Through the cockpit window, faint blue lights of rescue vehicles shimmered on the wet runway. Fire trucks and ambulances surrounded the aircraft, their flashing lights painting the rain-soaked tarmac in red and blue. The F-22s made one final pass overhead, their afterburners glowing faintly as they disappeared into the clouds, leaving the night in peace. Claire's hand still trembled on the control yoke. She exhaled, the first real breath since she'd entered the cockpit. The engines whined softly as they powered down. Outside, ground crews rushed toward the aircraft, their footsteps splashing in shallow water. In that moment, the chaos of the storm faded completely. Only the sound of rain remained, gentle, forgiving, almost musical. Claire looked around the cockpit, at the silent instruments, the still lights, the soaked windows, and realized the enormity of what had just happened. A plane that should have been lost in the storm now rested safely on solid ground, not because of training, not because of chance, because of courage, raw, instinctive, and unstoppable. The cabin doors opened. The night air rushed in cool and wet. Passengers stepped out one by one, faces lit by flashing lights, tears mixing with rain. Emergency crews moved quickly, checking on everyone, helping the weak and shaken. Cameras captured the scene not knowing, yet that they were documenting a miracle. As dawn began to break over the horizon, the first rays of sunlight pushed through the remaining clouds, glinting off the wet surface of the Boeing's wings. For a few seconds, the aircraft looked almost alive, a wounded giant resting after surviving the impossible. And somewhere among the chaos, Claire stood quietly, watching it all. She didn't seek attention. She didn't speak. She simply looked up at the sky, the same sky that had tried to claim her, and smiled faintly. That night would never be forgotten. The world would come to call it the miracle at 37,000 feet. And for years to come, every pilot who took to the skies would remember that in one of aviation's darkest nights, it wasn't rank, title, or experience that saved hundreds of lives. It was courage in its purest form.